Hello, welcome to Waypoint Survival. Today I want to show you how to light duct tape with a ferro rod. Stay tuned. As most of you already know, duct tape is very flammable and it will quite easily take a flame from a match or a lighter and will light and burn quite a while. It's a great resource in a survival situation. Duct tape has 1,000 uses. But one of the difficulties that I run into when I teach my classes is students lighting the duct tape with a Ferrocerium rod. Now on my ferro rod I have a bit of duct tape. It's 1 inch roughly, and just wrapped it around there. It's extra little handle just above where the hole goes in. So I have fire tinder here. I also have fire tinder cord that attaches my preferred striker to my 1/2 inch by 6 inch Ferrocerium rod. And so this is a great way to do it because I also have now 2 sources of tinder along with my fire starting device. So this in and of itself, along with a cutting tool, makes for a great little survival kit. Well, when it comes to lighting duct tape, there's a couple of tips and a couple little tricks that I need to share with you to make that a little bit easier. So if you always have duct tape with you, you always have a relatively waterproof and a certainly water resistant method of fire starting. It's also great for repairing gear, and as I said, it has 1,000 uses, so you should always have duct tape with you. Now I prefer the Gorilla brand duct tape. It doesn't necessarily have to be the black. I just happen to like this. I've used it quite extensively and I have quite a few rolls of this. But duct tape, of course, goes clear back to the late 1800s, about 1899, and it was originally a duck cotton that was, thick fabric that had an adhesive applied to it. So hence the name duct tape, spelled D-U-C-K. The modern duct tape, D-U-C-T, didn't come around until much, much later, in the 1950s or 60s. So when we say duct tape, we spell it with the D-U-C-K form because it literally has that cotton string inside of it that if you can see right here, this little string coming off of that, this is what we're trying to light. So when we light the duct tape, we're not actually lighting the plastic or the adhesive. We're actually trying to get those strings to light up, and that will help catch the rest of it on fire. So there are different methods to starting your cuts here. What we're looking for is a bunch of really tiny cuts on here because we're looking for small strings. Now using my Mora Eldris from my fire kit, you can actually come up to the duct tape like this and you can make a series of very small cuts just like this, just across it all the way down, just a little tiny cut, and you can see how that is right there. So that's one way to do it, but that takes a little time, and also it tends to cut deep into your duct tape so that you have a bunch of score marks down inside. You can do that, it depends on your hand strength and your ability, but I find it's just as easy to just tear it into strips. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'll pull off a piece about that long. Doesn't have to be much longer than that. So you could roughly say from about your elbow to your fingertip, somewhere through there. It doesn't even have to be that long. There is no specific way to do this. It's just depends on how big of a ball you want from your duct tape. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take this, and of course I already scored this, but we're just going to pinch it really hard between our fingers like this, just a real tight pinch, and then once we get that, we're going to just pull quickly like that until we have a real small strip, and then we take it and we make a ball out of it. Now don't squeeze this real tight. You want a very loose ball with your duct tape, and we just do this. We keep pulling off strips, and then we keep just putting it together into a loose duct tape ball. And I'm going to do that until I work my way all the way across, and I'll show you the end result. So while I'm tearing this duct tape, I wanted to show you all of the strings that are coming out of this duct tape as I'm tearing it. And again, once I get past the cuts that I made with the small Mora, I'm just literally gripping it between my fingers. You got to pinch pretty hard and then just pull it off. And that works really, really well. And it saves a lot of time from having to cut it and work with it that way. Now we have our duct tape ball, and as you can see, it's not real big. It sits in the palm of my hand, but it's very loose. We need all of those air spaces and all of those strings to be exposed. Now let's get to the real method, which is how do I light this on fire using just sparks. So placing this on a rock, because I don't want to get it on the ground, it does leave a sticky, kind of a residual mass once it burns. And of course you want to make sure that before you cook food over this, that you let it go ahead and burn out, because you don't want to breathe this smoke, nor do you want this in your food, especially if you're not cooking in a container but you're roasting over the open fire. So what you do is you put your ferrocerium rod, you try to find a good kind of an open spot, and you want to place it inside like this and hold it down. And then sharp and short strokes fairly rapidly into the duct tape. And there's a lot of factors that affect this, but the bottom line is you need to get a lot of heat concentrated in one place. So before I strike this ferro rod, I want to point out a couple of tips for you. Most people, when they attempt to do this, they want to take the ferro rod and they run all the way to the bottom. They'll just try to strike all the way to the bottom like that. And what they end up doing is they end up slapping out the spark. They extinguish it by going all the way to the bottom. So they'll run it down and then they'll put their own heat out. So that's not going to work. So when you're striking it, and this is a lot easier to do with this kind of striker than it is with the back of a knife, a 90-degree spine. And I don't recommend using a knife for that anyway. I always have my striker attached at any rate to my ferro rod. So if I've got my ferro rod, I've got the striker, so I don't need to use the back of my knife. And plus, as you all know, this is actually a blade sharpener, so it doubles as a sharpener, a bark scraper, as well as a ferro rod scraper. So when you're coming down, I always try to stop just a little bit before the edge. So I don't run mine all the way down. And as if you can see right here, you can see where it's actually stopped, about an inch or so from the bottom. So when I'm trying to light this, I'll bring it down and then I stop, like so, as I'm putting heat into it, because I don't want to run the risk of putting out the fire that I just started. Here we go. There we go. And once you get a flame going, of course, be aware that it's going to be sticky. But as you can see, it's a fairly quick procedure once you get that going. And it will sit there and burn for quite a long time. Long enough for you to be able to get your fire going. It's also somewhat wind resistant. As you can see, the wind's blowing pretty good. And it's sitting there and burning nicely. Now if you wish, you can of course move this, but once it starts to burn, it's going to be really sticky. So I encourage you to be very, very careful about, you know, getting this residue on anything. And you might occasionally, as you saw, get a little bit on the end of your ferro rod. But that's pretty much the technique. It's really not that difficult. It's not a waste of your ferrocerium rod if you do it right. And it's a very effective fire starter. It's the reason I carry it in other places in my gear, but also on my ferro rod. And in case you want to know, this, depending on the size of the ball of duct tape that you start with, this will burn for 3 to 5 minutes usually, because it has quite a bit of material there and plenty of time for you to get your fire started, even in wet conditions or a cold climate. Well, this is a fantastic option. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. And it's a very important skill to be able to own, to light duct tape with a ferro rod. It could come in really handy. Hopefully you'll take a little bit of it and wrap it around your ferro rod so that you can have it for later use, as well as for just general gear repair. It's a great item to have along. Also, when you come to take the Survival and Bushcraft Phase 1 class here at the Waypoint Survival School, this will be one task that you'll be able to accomplish quite easily, having practiced before time. This is James Bender for Waypoint Survival. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure and check out the links in the description box below. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. We'd really appreciate it. And when you do subscribe, make sure and press that bell button so that you can stay notified of all of our upcoming videos, and we'll talk to you next time. Okay, before I light this, I want to show you something. I'll change the angle of the camera a little bit. Now, a lot of people, when they do this, they'll try to run their striker all the way down to the bottom like this. And what you end up doing is you end up putting out the fire. You slap it out. This is especially easy to do if you use the back of your knife, like with a 90-degree spine, and I don't recommend that. I recommend this type of striker. This is a whole lot better. Rubber handle, it's easier to hold in cold weather, and it's attached permanently with a fire cord to my 1/2 inch by 6 ferro rod, so I'm always going to have it with me anyway. But I try to stop before I get to the end, and as you can see, I've worn the rod down just a little bit to this point. I don't usually go all the way down with it. That's because I don't want to, again, slap out the fire when I get to the bottom. So you want to do it something like this. Like that.